For example, I've seen you on TV a lot in the last couple of years. I know everything you know or that you tell us about the Russian situation. I don't have a clue what you think about healthcare. I've never heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're for Medicare for all or improve Obamacare or get a chicken. I don't know what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how do we help you get this done? Not how do we put more obstacles in the way? I haven't forgotten about your roof. All of that is important to keeping.
And my pot store.
And what?
And the pot store, the Woods that I own with Woody Harrelson. It's just the biggest problem we had was the government of California.
Bill Maher and Adam Schiff have clashed before, and it is never polite. Schiff walks in with a firm, no-compromise stance, while Maher fires back with his signature no-filter style, taking sharp shots live on air the moment they share a stage. You can feel the tension building fast. Awkward silence follows hard-hitting jokes, and neither side is willing to back down. This is not a friendly debate, it is a full-on clash of ideologies. Hit subscribe, settle in, and get ready to watch this intense showdown unfold.
A statement from the administration. The president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Maher did not just challenge Schiff here, he set a trap. First, he reads a statement about Libya and asks if it sounds vague. Schiff quickly agrees and says, yes, it is completely vague, but he does not realize what is coming. Those words were not from Trump, they were actually from Obama, and the moment Maher reveals that everything changes, the energy drops, the confidence fades, and Schiff looks caught off guard as the double standard is exposed right in front of everyone, and if that moment surprised you, what comes next makes it even more intense and uncomfortable.
TV productions continue to move out of California due to tax incentives in other states. What might the future look for Los Angeles? Is there a risk of it becoming the next Detroit?
I don't agree with the diagnosis of why the film industry is leaving. They're leaving because they're getting richer incentives in other states and other countries. And we haven't kept pace with that. So if you want to film in the United Kingdom, you're going to get a tremendous tax break, and our motion picture industry has left the country. If you want to film in New York or Georgia, there are generous tax incentives. If we want to keep the industry here, we're going to have to compete with tax incentives. California?
Nope. Hollywood is not leaving California for fun. It is moving because of rising costs. And yes, taxes are a big part of that conversation. People in the industry have been saying it for years. This is not some hidden mystery on top of that. Places like Georgia and countries like the UK offer strong production incentives, but the real issue is simple. California has become incredibly expensive to film, and so expensive that even shooting in Europe starts to look like the cheaper.
Every year, California loses people because they are being driven away by a high-tax, high regulation state where public services don't reach the standards that they should. That should be a signal that we shouldn't have one favored industry or another. We should have a favored state. California to be competitive.
And here is the part that really stands out even before Maher fully weighs in the criticism, is already building. California has been losing businesses and residents for years, and the reasons people point to are pretty consistent: high taxes, strict regulations, and a heavy rule structure that makes operating there expensive. Bill Maher has raised similar frustrations many times over the years, so the question becomes, why does Schiff keep framing it mainly as a simple incentives issue? Because that version sounds cleaner and far less uncomfortable than acknowledging the broader cost and regulatory pressures pushing production and companies elsewhere.
About your roof, all of that is important to keeping.
And my pot store.
And what?
And the pot store, the Woods that I own with Woody Harrelson. It's just the biggest problem we had was the government of California.
I imagine your producers are saying, oh God, I can't believe Schiff brought up his roof.
Yeah, I mean, we love it here. We want to live here. The West Coast has the sunshine and the girls all get so tan. I don't know how I can, but we just gotta make it friendlier.
California becoming more business-friendly is a real policy debate, but it is far more complex than blaming one leader or a handful of political figures. The state is dealing with serious challenges like high housing costs, expensive living, conditions and regulations that can slow down construction and business growth at the same time. It remains one of the largest and most powerful economies in the world, with massive tech, entertainment, and innovation sectors still attracting talent from everywhere. The real argument comes down to balance: how much to adjust taxes, how far to ease regulations, how to protect the environment while still staying competitive. Some people push for major reforms to cut costs and speed up development, while others believe those same systems are what protect long-term stability and quality of life. So the debate is not about collapse, it is about how to fix what is not working without damaging what still makes California.
I don't agree with the UK's proposal to impose a social media curfew for kids. How realistic is it to enforce? One night suggesting I was going to open a place called Bill Maher's Catholic School. Let me finish. Because Catholic schools are popular now, even with people who aren't Catholic, because it's the last place you can send your kid to get an old school education. And they just tell the kids, forget about the Jesus stuff. Just, to them, that's okay indoctrination, as opposed to some of the other indoctrination that goes on. And also, the Catholics don't put up with bullshit. They take your phone. You have to learn your P's and Q's and your grammar and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I just don't understand. That parents don't have the whip hand anymore. Not that you should.
Now, let's talk about something people often ignore. The same voices that pushed phones and constant internet access into classrooms claimed it would modernize education, but what followed instead was more distraction, shorter attention spans, weaker focus, and a learning environment where many students struggle to stay engaged. And now the effects are becoming harder to deny. So Bill Maher raises a direct question: should the United States consider following the UK approach and place limits on social media access for kids until they reach a certain age?
TV show that has a teenager in it cannot be mischaracterizing this. And the kids they don't listen to their parents. They turn their back on them. They walk out of the room. Things that would just get me shut down when I was a kid. And I think it starts with the phone.
It sounds like a simple question, but it carries real weight because it puts responsibility and outcomes front and center. Bill Maher keeps pressing the idea that classrooms are meant for learning, not constant scrolling and distraction, and as the debate heats up, the core point becomes harder to ignore. Focus and discipline in education still matter, and many believe the system has drifted away from that standard. Whether you agree or not, this kind of pressure test makes the conversation uncomfortable for politicians because it forces them to answer to real-world results instead of staying in the safety of policy language.
The reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself.
This took place before the election when Schiff was projecting confidence that Democrats would perform well, while Maher took a more skeptical tone and began challenging those assumptions in real time through direct questions and sharp pushback. The conversation quickly shifted from simple predictions to a clash between certainty and doubt, with Maher pressing for evidence rather than relying on optimism alone, which is what gave the exchange its tense and competitive edge, instead of feeling like straightforward commentary.
The Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense." Right. And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating sports by sex makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And if you think it doesn't, you can't leave the country.
And that's cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Okay. I'm just giving you the answer to the question you're asking all night long. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? It's not always because they like him. No, it's because stuff like that is kooky.
And here is the broader point Maher is making. He argues that election outcomes are often driven by voter frustration and public perception, just as much as policy debates. And when people feel ignored or dismissed, they eventually respond at the ballot box. He also criticizes how politicians can get comfortable inside friendly media environments, where questions are softer and pushback is limited compared to more adversarial platforms. So his message is that if leaders truly believe in their ideas, they should be able to defend them in tougher interviews, not just in supportive settings, and that real political strength is tested when the conversation is not controlled or comfortable.
I've seen you on TV a lot in the last couple of years. I know everything you know, or that you tell us, about the Russian situation. I don't have a clue what you think about healthcare. I've never heard it. Yeah. I don't know whether you're for Medicare for all, or improve Obamacare, or get a chicken. I don't know what.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know what.
Here's what I was telling my colleagues, and particularly these wonderful candidates we had running in the midterms. Don't talk about Russia. You're not going to persuade people to vote Democrat or Republican based on Russia.
But what about Trump?
Now, I get asked about it because, our investigation for the last 2 years was the only investigation into what Russia did.
Right.
And people ask me about it. But what I urge the candidates and what I urge our nominees to talk about is, how are you going to help American people put bread on the table? How are you going to help them provide for a secure retirement in an environment which people don't stay in the same job their whole life, in a job with globalization and automation? How do people get health care? How do they keep health care when they go from job to job? How do we help young people afford college? Those are the things we need to be talking about. We are in the midst of two revolutions right now, either one of which would be phenomenally disruptive. The two put together are just producing this cataclysm of xenophobic populism around the world. And it's the revolution in the global economy through globalization and automation, when millions are losing their jobs through no fault of their own. And it's the revolution in communication, which is every bit as significant as the invention of the printing press, but it happened overnight, where lies travel faster than truths, where hate goes viral. And you put those two things together, and it is a combustible mix. And addressing those challenges, talking about how in this environment we're going to put people to work, we're going to deal with this yawning gap between rich and poor. We're going to make sure that whether you have one job in the morning and you drive an Uber at night, that you have health care at the end of the day and a retirement at the end of your career. That's, I think, what we need to be talking about.
And I'll let you go, but I see you going on Fox News.
Well, I had some good encouragement from someone very close
Everybody's
to you.
going on Fox News now.
But Schiff does what politicians often do in these kinds of debates. He shifts away from the direct framing. Maher is pushing a very simple question: what is your message? Not just criticism of Trump or standard talking points, but a clear statement of direction, because the larger issue being raised is that political messaging can become overly centered on one figure. And when that happens, it risks replacing a broader platform with constant opposition voters eventually start asking what is actually being offered in practical terms, what changes are being proposed, and why they should trust that direction. And if those answers are not clear or consistent, people tend to disengage from the message altogether.
Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who before the 24 election said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get fucking torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying, don't ever use the word socialist again. And one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Then Maher shifts the focus to a broader political trend around messaging and labels like socialism and socialist branding, and he treats it less as pure ideology and more as political strategy. His point is that certain words trigger strong reactions in the electorate, and historically labels like socialism can create concern among moderates and independent voters who may associate them with economic risk or instability, while supporters see them as a push for reform or fairness. So the question he raises is, why political leaders lean into framing that energizes their base but may also alienate swing voters, and whether that trade-off is being fully weighed in modern campaign strategy.
so how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
At the end of it all, Maher's main message lands more like a warning than a punchline or a gotcha. He argues that Democrats, especially voices like Schiff, often lean toward comfort over clarity, relying on familiar talking points and expecting audiences to fill in the gaps. His broader criticism is about consistency and communication, because when narratives feel convenient but real-world conditions are messy, people notice. So he keeps circling the same pressure points, contradictions, double standards, and messaging that may sound polished in a controlled studio setting but feels less convincing when tested outside that environment, from political framing to issues like cost of living, education, and cultural debates. His recurring argument is that voters respond to lived reality, not rehearsed language. And in his view, the risk is simple. If those concerns are ignored or dismissed, the political center becomes harder to hold and trust becomes harder to maintain. That's the real debate happening right now, and it's far from over. This is Debate Storm. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments, because your opinion is part of this conversation. Stay sharp, stay questioning, and I'll see you in the next one.